Okay, I'm pleased to introduce our next speaker, Annabel Kay Ruiz. Annabel is a professor of research and composition at Florida State University International Programs. She holds an MA in Linguistics and is completing her PhD at the University of Valencia, Spain. She has taught ESL, literature, and creative writing for over 10 years to children, teenagers, and adults. During Annabel's talk, we recommend watching in speaker view, and if you have any questions, please type them in the Q&A box. Take it away. Please share your screen, Annabel.
Thank you so much, Simon, for your warm welcome, and thank you to everyone, the organising committee, for putting on this wonderful event. I feel so inspired. I'd like to first of all say thank you to Emily, to the previous speaker. As Simon mentioned, I'm currently teaching university level students online as well, and everything that you said completely applies. So it's really nice. It feels like such a community spirit that we're all learning from each other. Okay, I'm going to share my screen with you now. Can you all hear me? If you could mention in the chat box if you can hear me okay and see the screen, that would be great if you could write yes. And perfect, thank you so much. All right, so let me share my presentation with you. Perfect. Okay, so as you can see, I'm going to be telling you about digital fables. My PhD is actually on digital storytelling. I'm very, very interested in how we can apply digital storytelling to the educational context. And in 2015, so it was 5 years ago, I was working for a language academy here in Spain. And they would send me to different schools around the city that I live in, which is Valencia. And it was great because I had so much flexibility where I could literally just go to the school and I would do after school workshops. And they would be workshops about spoken skills. Specifically, I would go and I would help the children of all ages with conversational English. And as I say, in 2015, I was asked to give a series of weekly after school workshops at a school. So it was on a Friday. They'd already finished their school day. And we just had fun. We literally, it was going in and it was focusing on spoken skills. You can see here, the school wanted me to focus specifically on spoken English and critical thinking skills specifically. And it was a group of 12-year-olds. So I had freedom to choose exactly what we did with the workshop, as long as I focused on spoken English and critical thinking skills. And I thought, why not digital storytelling? I think, as lots of the speakers have mentioned, you know, students work really, really well with digital tools if they're done in the right way, I feel like. And given the emphasis on speaking competence, I thought that digital storytelling would be a good tool to use. Now, digital storytelling has been going for many, many years. But in the 1990s, there was a team, it was headed by Joe Lambert, and he wanted to kind of put together an educational framework for digital storytelling. And basically he said, all right, it's narration, it's the narrative techniques, and it's the multimedia tools coming together to help students to learn. And he and his team, they said that the best digital stories in the classroom were between 2 and 5 minutes, so not too long. And also narrated with the author's own voice. That's really, really important. So that's the kind of the autonomous learning here, which, as we all know, is vital. So as Gregory Signes says, you can see here, the student undoubtedly learns to learn because they're in control of the storytelling process. Just to kind of give you a little bit of information as to the Spanish context, for secondary education, the core competencies, so the core skills that students are expected to acquire at secondary level: linguistic communication skills, skills relating to knowledge and interaction with the physical world, information management and digital skills. It's quite interesting that it's picked up on as a core competence that needs to be focused on by teachers. Social and citizenship skills, cultural and artistic skills, and as we mentioned before, autonomous skills. And I feel like digital storytelling covers all of these skills in different ways, which is what we're going to talk about. I want this talk to be as practical as possible. So later on, I'm going to give you lots of different websites and tools that you might want to apply in your own teaching. As I said, autonomous learning was my core focus of this workshop. I wanted the students to work on their own pronunciation. I wanted them to choose the images and everything that kind of went into these stories. But at the same time, I thought that it was important that there was a running theme. I wanted all of the stories to have the same kind of focus or shared objective. And when it came to choosing that objective, I decided to focus on the second core component of the workshop, which was the encouragement of critical thinking skills. So in terms of critical thinking skills, I thought, how about Aesop's fables? I'm sure that many of you are familiar with Aesop's fables, but just a little bit of background information here. So Aesop's fables, a collection of fables accredited to Aesop, who lived between 620 and 564 BC. So we're talking a long, long time ago. Originally, the fables themselves, or the stories, were entirely oral. So they were passed on from person to person in a spoken fashion. But some 3 centuries after Aesop's death, they were actually written down and published for the first time, essentially. Now, what's quite interesting is that nowadays, I'm sure that many of us link fables with children, right? We think fables for children. Originally, they were actually kind of thought of as addressed to adults. They covered, as we know, religious themes, social, political themes. They always had a moral at the core, but they were originally addressed at adults. Now, philosopher John Locke, I'm sure many of you have heard of him, he was the first who said, I think that we can actually really help children's learning using fables. And he spoke about how the memory retention of fables, if you learn them as children, then they're going to stay with you as adults. And especially if they have pictures to go along with them. So I really liked that phrase kind of as an application to children's learning of the fables. So Vincent Mastro in 2014 really agreed with this idea that Locke put forward, as fables are great for critical thinking skills at the child level, right? I know some of you are primary level teachers, and I wanted to recommend his adaptation book of Aesop stories, the first book of Childhood Adventures. It's a really, really great series. And Mastro said, critical thinking is the way by which we objectively analyze the pros and the cons of a situation in order to make an informed decision. I know that Vinicius on Friday, he did a great talk about critical thinking, and I got a lot of food for thought from that one. But yeah, basically, Vincent Mastro is a huge kind of supporter of using the fables for critical thinking, for encouraging critical thinking. And he says, the fables present a typical problem that children readily understand and can relate to, because as we said, they're morals about right and wrong, about the animals themselves, of course, they're very familiar with. We know that children, they love, if you say, draw an half elephant and half cow, anything to do with animals very much appeals to their imagination, you know. So one or more characters, often animals, will go along resolving a problem. And how do we kind of encourage critical thinking with this? By asking the children to think about how the different characters are feeling. So for example, when we talk about the hare and the tortoise, how is the hare feeling now that he's lost? How could he do it differently next time? Something along those lines. So yeah, I decided that Aesop's fables would be a great kind of central theme for the different digital stories. And now it was time to think about the digital tools themselves that would help us to put together the digital stories. And Bernardine Porter is the author of a great book about digital storytelling called DigiTales. And she says, a story should be remembered for its soul, not for the bells and whistles. And I love that, and I completely agree. If you don't have a good or powerful story, script, storyboard, and the visuals, of course, then there will never be enough decorating that technology can do to cover it up. It should be about the storytelling and not about getting stressed out about too much tech, etc. So with that in mind, I set about organizing the sessions. There were 10 sessions in total. So I'm going to just kind of break down the different steps for you. First of all, I would like to recommend this website, read.gov/Aesop. I know that this is going to go onto YouTube, so you can go back and have a look at the links and stuff. This is an interactive collection of the fables, And the students responded really well to them. Like I say, I was working with 12-year-old students, and I was thinking, will they react well? Will they think it's too maybe childish? They loved it. It's very, very clear. In the classroom, I had like a big projector screen. So I had the projection of the stories. And then I was just reading through, and then we would have a look at the images and describe the images to bring in some of the language of description, of course, as well. So the first step was just get familiar with the fables and what they're all about. And then we had a session where we had guided readings. So this is where I came out, and I had these little PowerPoints about each of the stories, and I had images and the morals in each case. So for example, I don't know if you're familiar with the town mouse and the country mouse. I decided to incorporate 7 fables because it was 14 students in total, and I wanted them to work in pairs. So it was 7 fables that we focused on. And for example, the town mouse and the country mouse is really interesting because it's all about a mouse who lives in the countryside and who dreams of a life in the city or in the town. And then eventually he goes and visits a mouse who does live in the town and realizes that it's not all that it's cracked up to be. The grass is not always greener on the other side. There was also, for example, I don't know if you're familiar with The Lion and the Mouse. This is a story of a lion who's going to eat a mouse. He's going to catch this mouse. And the mouse says, please, just save me, save my life, and maybe I can help you another day. And eventually, or actually the day afterwards, the lion actually gets caught by a poacher. He puts him in a net, and the mouse is the one who's able to help him out because he's got his little teeth and he can gnaw the lion outside of that net. And it kind of shows that all of us, regardless of our size, regardless of, you know, we've been speaking about diversity, regardless of what we look like, we all have something that we can give to society. We can help each other out, right? It's that sense of community as well. The Owl and the Grasshopper is a very interesting story as well because it's about flattery. So we have an owl who wants to catch the grasshopper and says, wow, you're so wonderful, you look so great, come by my side, and then he ends up eating him. So we need to think about ulterior motives and why someone is maybe being very nice about you or flattering you. I'm sure you're familiar with the wolf in sheep's clothing or the hare and the tortoise. I'm going to show you the hare and the tortoise later on, an example. The frogs, yes, the frogs who wished for a king. This is a group of frogs who they're doing really well for themselves as a community. They've got great community spirit, but they feel like it would be better to have someone ruling over them and giving them kind of instructions and direction. But then it actually turns out that it's not quite as good because they have a stork who also ends up eating them. There's quite a lot of kind of animals being eaten by each other, but you can see there's always this moral at the core there. And then The Fox Without a Tail is about a fox who loses his tail, and then he wants everyone else to suffer in the same way. So he tries to encourage them to also cut off their own tails. So again, thinking about why someone would say something, thinking about trust, thinking about ulterior motives, etc. So anyway, those were the guided readings that we had in class, these stories. And then I put the students into pairs and we pulled out one name of each fable out of a hat. So I said, this pair, you're going to be working on, for example, the town mouse and the country mouse. And once the students, they knew which one they were going to be working on and the pair, we marked up the assigned fables. I know, was it Vinny? No, not Vinny, sorry, Jay yesterday was talking about visual storyboards. I really loved that session as well. I love using visual storyboards in class. I think it's great also to kind of promote this autonomous learning. The students were, each pair was given a storyboard, and with a pencil, they just penciled in the kind of images that they thought represented the different scenes in the story. And then they would just write up the narration side. So I gave them a lot of freedom in terms of preparing the narration. I wanted them to feel free to adapt grammatical structures, for example, passives into active, incorporate synonyms. If they wanted to incorporate more dialogue than was in the original text that we were working with or that we had a look at in the guided readings. I wanted them to feel free to put together a script of sorts, so a narration that they would feel confident with later on when they actually had to do the recording, right? The one thing that was very, very important was that they would speak for a similar amount of time. So I wanted to make sure that the speakers would narrate for a similar time period so that everyone had a chance to practice their English, of course. Once we had the narration, we had the images, it was time to find the images, because we had the narration, but I wanted them to find photos or animations that they thought would fit well with their narration, because obviously they had sketched up kind of ideas on their storyboards. But then we went to the computer lab. So the school gave us access as part of this after school club. They said, absolutely, you can use the computer lab. So we went into the computer lab, and in pairs, the students were looking for images related to the fables. So imagine if they had the town mouse and the country mouse, they would look up little pictures of mice, pictures of a big mansion in the city or whatever. That, you know, their imagination was free to kind of to roam. And the only thing that I told them was important to get them used to also kind of copyright and things like this. But on Google, we filtered by using the usage rights filter. And also we used Pixabay. I'm sure many of you are aware of Pixabay. I would highly recommend. They have royalty-free images, and some of them were really, really useful for the fables. Now, I also told the students that I wanted them to use a maximum of 10 images per pair. I thought that it was important to limit the amount of images so that then when it came to actually doing the narration, they wouldn't be going from one to the other and rushing the process. So to avoid quick transitions and too many images, I said 10 images maximum, because the narrations themselves were going to be lasting between 2 and 5 minutes. That's what I decided to set. Okay, so we at this stage had the images. The students had written up their narration, and then it was very important for me to help them with intonation and pronunciation. So I would go around the room. The other pairs were listening to while the one pair that I was working with, while they were going through their pronunciation and intonation. So it was almost like it was a group process where they were learning from each other. And once they were 100% confident with the pronunciation of their stories, of their narration, then we went and we used Audacity. Now, I know that Catherine, before she mentioned Vocaroo, I'm definitely going to look into that tool as well. The Audacity was good because it's completely free, and we could download directly the audio files onto their desktop. So it took a few tries. You can imagine some of the students didn't feel entirely confident, and I wanted them to feel so good about what they were producing. So I gave them that time to make sure if they wanted to re-record something, or maybe record one part. They didn't have to do the whole thing in one go. You could do it in fragments, in portions. And by the end, they felt so proud. It was wonderful to see some of the students who were a little bit maybe more shy about their speaking skills, to actually see that they were very proud of what they had produced. That was wonderful. So at this stage, as I say, we had the images, the narration was now recorded. I haven't mentioned, but I took a USB. I had a USB stick that I would take into every workshop session, and I would, on my own USB, save into different folders. So I would have a folder for each pair, and then I would save their images, the narration, just to get it all organized and to make sure that nothing got lost during the week. So I think that that's really important if you're thinking about doing something along these lines. Now, once we had the narration portion, I thought that it would appeal to the imagination if the students also went on FreeSound. This is a great site. It's user run, so anyone can upload different audio files, and you can download them directly from the website. You don't need an account or anything, which I thought was nice. And you can see here, for example, a student looked up frog, and then you'd have hundreds and hundreds of different audio files of frogs, of the sound effects. And they absolutely loved this session. They would say, teacher, listen, this is my, and they would find, for example, a roar of a lion, or a laughing monkey or something, anything at all that they thought was relevant to their story. They would download the audio files, and I would put that into the relevant USB folders as well. So yeah, completely Creative Commons, open license. FreeSound is a great site for sound effects. And after that, we basically had all of the elements that we needed to incorporate into our digital stories. And it was up to me to decide, obviously, which application we would use in order to actually to put the stories together. And I'm not sure if you're aware of the Windows 10 Photos app. So most laptops or computers will actually have this integrated. But if not, if you go on the Microsoft store, I believe, if you look up Microsoft Photos in Google, it's a completely free to download app. And it's wonderful for children, especially because it's very, very user-friendly. You open the Photos app itself, and then you open the video editor, and you select new video project, and then it completely opens up for you. And it's nice because you have these different tracks where you can upload all of the images that you have. You can decide, you can drag and drop in the order that you'd like them to be in. And then you have an audio track where you can have several audio tracks. So that's where we would put in the sound effects and the narration and everything. It sounds complicated, but honestly, it was so simple because, as you can see, the actual interface itself is very, very user-friendly, as I say. So once they had put everything in order, then they actually just had to put the amount of time that they wanted each image to last for. So imagine you wanted a turtle to last for, I don't know, for example, 30 seconds, then you would just type in 30. So it helped the students with maths as well. It was so many different skills that we integrated. So I think that was great. Why did I choose Windows 10 Photos? Because I know that there are many other free apps available. I really liked the subtitling function here. It was very, very easy to use. And I wanted each pair to make sure that before they downloaded the final files, so the final digital stories, that they would also put in their subtitles, because it was very, very important that they would kind of reinforce the spelling by putting in the subtitles. So that was really, really useful. So I would definitely recommend, as I say, Microsoft Photos. And then it was time for the final session. So this was the last step in the process. We downloaded and we saved, as I said before, we imported in MP4 files, the definitive stories onto the USB. And then I came back the following week and we had a presentation session, and it was so much fun. It was wonderful. Each student, they would come out in obviously the pairs. So the pairs would come out and they would present their story. They would say, now we are going to show you our story. And, you know, I wanted them to kind of practice presenting as well. I think that those are really important skills. And then they would talk after they had shown their own video to the rest of the class. They would talk about how they feel that their stories apply to the present day. So we had almost like it was like a debate. They would start it off. Each talk was led by the pair who had created the fable. But then I completely opened it up also to the other students. And it was really, really fruitful. Some of the discussions that we had about the different morals, for example, about the town mouse and the country mouse. We spoke about money handling and social issues, different social classes and money. For example, we spoke about bullying. We had a debate about bullying as well with the lion and the mouse, and how we're all special. We all have our different skills to bring to the table. Trust, ulterior motives, social media. It was very interesting when we were talking about flattery and false flattery and the kind of society that we live in. Wishing for change versus enjoying the present, of course, taking advantage of the current day and what we have available. And the importance of persistence or learning from failure with the hare and the tortoise. So I want to show you an example. I think I'm okay. Yeah, this is only a 1 minute example, just to show you kind of what we could achieve with this. The hare and the tortoise. I don't know if you can hear the audio, but if not, you can just get an idea for what it looks like. it's nice, you can see, you can put effects as well. The students love some of those special effects. And then we would share the moral. I wanted all of the students to sum up the moral and include it there on the final slide. So that gives you an idea of what you can achieve with these tools. My conclusion would be that by preparing and adapting the script, recording the narration, discussing the morals, I think that the workshop gave students the chance to develop many different skills, including vocabulary, pronunciation, and critical thinking skills primarily, but also gaining confidence in all of these different tech tools available to them that are involved in the storytelling process. So I think it was a really great activity, and I would definitely encourage any of you who work with students of different levels, because I feel like a lot of it is very adaptable, to maybe give it a go. And these are some references here, as I say, it'll all be available to you. And I'd like to thank you so much for your time and for listening and for sharing with me as well all of your ideas. If you have any questions at all for me, please do share. Let me see if I can see your questions. I can see Stella here. Do you accept discussions in Spanish? Do they discuss only in English? Do they have enough linguistic repertoire to deal with the debates? Okay, we were talking about this before actually, yesterday, with this kind of interlanguage thing and where I stand with it. I do accept Spanish in the classroom as long as I can then translate those structures into English. So for example, when we were having the debates about the morals and how, how they felt about how some of these things would apply in current Spanish society, of course, we're talking about 12-year-olds. There were many things that they weren't able to express, and it was a perfect opportunity to write on the board specific vocabulary that they weren't aware of, right? So they would say it in Spanish, and then we would have that debate. The reference slide, of course, I can go back now. I'll do that for you, and I'll copy and paste it in the chat after the talk, Nina. Yes, so I was saying to Stella, I would take it as an opportunity to teach them even more vocabulary. I don't agree with zero Spanish in the classroom, and especially when we're having a talk about things that are quite complex, morals, etc. So I feel like it was important to allow certain aspects of these discussions to be had in Spanish. I must say that I, as much as possible, encourage the students to have these debates in English, but of course, there are certain things that they're not going to be able to express, and that's where I took the opportunity to pick up on any vocabulary that they weren't able to, and I would put that on the board. How to integrate the story-centered approach in a classroom which has a set curriculum.
Annabel, sorry, I'm afraid I'm sorry, I'm going to have to stop you there. I'm afraid.
Oh, okay.
But that was wonderful. Thank you very much. I think I love the idea of your kind of, you're taking new technology and ancient stories and literature, and you're kind of marrying them up. And and I think it's very easy these days to kind of think, oh, new technology, forget about what's happened in the past, forget about storybooks, all those kind of things, but it's still relevant. It's just a new way of doing things, and bringing back those stories to the young learners. Fantastic.
Thank you so much. Pleasure.